We acknowledge First Nations people as the rightful custodians, and we respect the resilience of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and respect their right to and aspiration for self-determination and empowerment. This new Lunchtime Logics webinar series is where we're going to be hearing from practitioners around Australia, which is very exciting, who are working with young people who use violence and aggression in the home. We explore the program's theory of change and their program logic. So what is the program's understanding about what is required to support change for families experiencing young person violence? What are the activities and the practice approaches that are essential in this practice space? And what are the intended outcomes that we're looking for? Delivered by the Domestic Violence Prevention Centre Gold Coast, the Holding Hope Creating Change is an early intervention program for young people who use violence against family members. The program has 2 practitioners who provide weekly or fortnightly sessions focusing on communication skills and safety planning. We have Brianna joining, who's a team leader. She's previously worked in the women's team and court advocacy program, as well as working with families subject to child safety intervention and those in foster care. And we also have Olivia, who is a social worker. Her role with the program is that of an advocate, which we'll hear more about, working with both young people and their female caregivers.
Thanks, Carolyn, for the introduction and everyone for joining us today. Before we do get started, I would just like to take the time to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land where we're standing today, the Coomaberry Saltwater people. I'd like to extend this welcome to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today, and to acknowledge that this land was never ceded and always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'll now jump to Brianna to introduce the program.
Thanks, Olivia, and thanks everyone for joining today. So I'll just explain a bit about how the program works and the target group and how it all came about. So the Holding Hope Creating Change pilot is funded through youth justice targeted responses to the youth crime through grants that they were offering for some time. So we have, just to explain, the Domestic Violence Integrated Response on the Gold Coast, also called the DVIR. And so some of the feedback through the DVIR was that there was a need around young person violence, and particularly young person violence being used in the home towards their mothers. And then when this funding opportunity came up, we applied for it and were successful. So as a part of the program, we decided to focus on providing intensive support to children who are aged 8 to 12 years, using violent or other harmful behaviour towards their mothers or other female primary caregiver. So we, when we talk, we'll primarily refer to the child's mother. So at the moment, all the adult women in the program are mothers to the children, but we do acknowledge that we have the capacity to support where maybe the female caregiver isn't the child's mother, but might be another relative, for example. So the idea is that both the child and the mother receive their own one-to-one support with their own advocate. That support is able to be intensive, so we're able to meet with the mother and the child weekly or fortnightly as they prefer. That support is primarily provided face-to-face, and the aim was to work with each family for approximately 6 to 8 months. It's also a consent-based service, so the mother or child can choose to withdraw from the program at any time, because we really do want to honour their own autonomy around the services that they want to engage in. So what we're aiming to do is to support the repair of the attachment relationship between the child and their mother, acknowledging that this attachment has been negatively impacted by their shared experience of domestic and family violence. So the children and mothers that we're working with have both experienced violence from an adult person. So in most cases, this is their father or sometimes their stepfather. And that has been, like we said, a shared experience that has impacted on them both. So we practice from a feminist intersectional framework. And part of what we're trying to do is to shift the narratives of mother blame or blaming the child, recognising that the child's use of violence is directly linked to their own experience of DV. And we aim to explore with mothers how that adult person, like, their ex-partner, for example, how his choice to use violence has forced upon them situations and choices that might have gone against her own parenting values, or how she would have chosen to parent if there had been no violence. We can provide tailored psychoeducation to mothers. So we don't have a curriculum, like a set curriculum. So we're able to be guided around what the mother wants to get out of the engagement in the program, what her goals and her needs are. So we can work with them on things like understanding the impact of trauma and domestic violence on child development, the impact of DV upon themselves, like exploring power and control dynamics, supporting them around how they might work towards repairing the relationship with their child, which is something that I think all of the mothers have said just about is something that's really important to them. We can also provide support around understanding neurodiversity. Like, we can be quite flexible around the kind of support that we're offering to mum. We also, in the way in which we work with children, it's really important for us to acknowledge that they are also victim survivors of domestic and family violence. We want to work with them in a strength-based way. We want to build their confidence and self-esteem and their sense of identity as well. And while we are child-led, we do aim to guide interventions that address the child's needs, such as building up their capacity to regulate emotions and build safe relationships. So part of the funding through the Youth Crime Grant was that we needed to select what they call youth justice outcomes. So, for example, one is like supporting the child around managing everyday stress, or like seeking to increase their emotional regulation. So we have those kind of objectives in mind when working with the child. We at the beginning of support, we scale with the child and with the mother separately about where they think they are, like on a scale of 1 to 5, like just in accordance with the youth justice outcomes that we were given. Then we seek to engage, build rapport with the child and engage with them like around their interests, and then work towards increasing their capacity, like in those particular areas. Another thing that's really essential in the program is safety. So Holding Hope Creating Change is part of the larger Domestic Violence Prevention Centre. So increasing safety for women and children is a really high priority for us. So a big part of the work is supporting safety planning, and that's around both the adult person's use of violence and around the child's use of violence as well. We wanted the program to have some flexibility. So what's something, and this is sort of borne out in the research and probably in the practice experience, is that childcare responsibilities do primarily fall upon mothers, like in most cases. So we acknowledge that the mums that we are working with are carrying like a pretty heavy load. So they're trying to keep themselves safe and their children safe, but they're also have multiple other responsibilities to juggle. They will often have more than one child. Quite a few of the mums, like, they're working to support their families, like, they might be the sole person bringing in income. So it's really hard to get to so many appointments when you're trying to work, like to keep a roof over your head and food on the table. As well, like if all of their children have been impacted by DV, then there's also a lot of needs relating to that as well. So we try to increase our flexibility by offering outreach. So we don't do outreach to private homes, but we have been doing outreach to community locations. And we also have the option of providing outreach to schools, and that's with the aim of increasing capacity for the mother and child to participate. So, for example, the mother may live like 30 to 45 minutes away from our office, but if there might be a potential community location we can use that might only be 5 or 10 minutes from her house, and that can increase her capacity to get herself and her child, to appointments and access support a bit easier. We actually haven't ended up doing any outreach to schools, so that's still an option. But I suppose, and we were talking with Carolyn about this before, is that I suppose there were some things that we thought would be really popular options, and it turns out that maybe it wasn't needed in quite the way that we thought. And I guess, some mums had some concerns about privacy, and also a couple of schools that were approached actually weren't very keen on the idea, which has been one of our learnings, and, something for us to reflect on and think about how we might work that a bit differently the next time that a mother expresses that she thinks the school would be a good location for support. We're also aiming to sort of intervene at an earlier age with the children. So our target group is 8 to 12 at the time of referral. One of the things that came out of the focus groups and discussion from the DVIR was around intervening when perhaps the children's use of violence was less significant or less risk to harm, because it's identified that the children didn't start using violence when they were teenagers. They'd actually had started earlier, like when they were younger. So that was kind of the thinking behind the younger age group. Also, we don't require that all contact with the adult person using violence has ceased. So I know some programs are the same as us. They don't require that, and other programs do. So some of the thinking behind that was around acknowledging that the reality for the mothers and the children that we're working with is that the adult who used violence is their father. The system very often doesn't support mothers to sever that relationship or to cease contact, or even to get that contact supervised. Women are often unsuccessful in family court when seeking such orders, and often unsuccessful in DV court as well. So this person does remain in their lives. And we also would acknowledge too that the child and the mother, they might still want or need that relationship in some capacity, because the child's relationship with their father, from the child's point of view, is potentially more than just violence to them. So there also may be an attachment, or a desire for the child or young person to maintain that relationship in some capacity. And we didn't want to create too many barriers to mothers and children receiving this specialist support, and wanted them to feel like we can support them, if there is escalation from the adult person using violence. And I suppose that's one of the benefits with this program sitting in a domestic violence service. So the advocates in the program are also domestic violence specialists. They are able to respond promptly around threats to safety, from the adult person using violence, with safety planning and engaging with other partners in the DVIR to increase safety for the mother and child. We also have the option that if there are situations where the child doesn't want to engage in the program, or maybe can't because of safety issues, is we are able to work with the mother only as well, and provide her with that specialist support. So that's also been, I think, really good. For example, that's allowed us to support one mother whose child is posing an extremely high risk to her safety. So his behaviour, his use of violence, is quite extreme. And with all the time that he spends with his father, there hasn't really been safe options for engaging him. But we have been able to support mum, and that's been really critical to increasing her safety, because she wasn't really receiving any support. Her child is really quite young. He's only 12. She didn't really seem to be getting a lot of that kind of support from other services, who primarily saw that this was a fault of her parenting, unfortunately. So that certainly allows, for those situations, for those mothers to receive that specialist support. So I'm just going to hand over to Olivia now, and Olivia is going to give some examples of some of the interventions.
Thanks, Brianna. So in this study, we're going to speak about Max, who is a 10-year-old boy using violence towards his mother. Max and his mother have both experienced significant post-separation abuse by Max's biological father. So here we have an intervention called the Man Box. So this is something that was introduced to Max in a one-on-one session with Max and his advocate. So in this activity, Max was encouraged to have a think about and to share some of his beliefs of what a typical man is or should aspire to be. During this activity, Max and his advocate were actually able to have a really open discussion around gender beliefs and masculinity, as well as different kind of societal pressures and impacts on both boys and girls, using age-appropriate language throughout. And in this example, Max is quite young. In this session, Max was really open and receptive to this, as well as to his advocate highlighting some of the contradictions in some of his beliefs that he was holding. So, for example, Max had down as one of his beliefs, men earn the money. In his life, it was mum who was the primary carer, and mum was the primary income earner as well, working 3 jobs. So without using shame and telling Max that, these are wrong or they're not right, this activity opens space for Max to think more about these ideas and where they came from and whether he thinks they're helpful or they're harmful. It can be noted that this type of intervention is something we would maybe offer midway through support once a level of rapport and a safe therapeutic relationship had already been created between the young person and their advocate. So here is an activity we might complete with mothers in session. So this intervention encourages mothers to reflect on how domestic and family violence has impacted on a mother's parenting. What we see, and I guess what we know, is that a mother's parenting abilities, along with her connection with her children, may have been negatively affected by violence from an adult perpetrator. It's not uncommon for the person using violence to have actively and intentionally undermined her as a mother, along with the relationship with her children. In the above example, this mother spoke to different things like alienating and belittling their thoughts about me. The way he spoke to me has molded the way my child speaks to me, exposing the kids to inappropriate content on TV and always doing the opposite of what I would say, using the children to get information on me. So this intervention aims to place the accountability for the impacts of parenting and the mother-child relationship on the perpetrator. This can be a really helpful tool to kind of support mothers in reducing the blame and shame that they come to sessions with that, the child's behaviour is their fault or is a result of their parenting. Again, for some mums, this conversation may occur just in the natural flow of conversation, whereas for others, having the visual aids is really helpful by having something tangible in front of them.
So just to, I guess, provide a bit of a recap, when we're thinking about our program theory, what I've heard is that by intervening earlier in the child's life by both individual support to mother and child, we can then support the repair of the attachment and relationship and therefore reduce incidents and prevent further escalation of violence. In a bit of a nutshell. The inputs we've heard are we've got DV specialists in this program, separate advocates for both young person or child and mum, and activities, outreach to community locations, and that's potentially a point of difference for some other programs who may only operate on site, or also for those who may go into the homes of families. Individual flexible support to both mum and child, so no set curriculum, as you've mentioned, but working with child and mum to reflect on past experiences, emotional regulation, stress management, gently challenging gendered beliefs. And I guess the outcomes we heard were trying to shift some of those narratives that might have become a little bit stuck around blame and shame. Therefore, with some of those changes, we could hopefully start to see improvements in dynamics in the relationships at home. How's that for my summary of what I've heard? Is there anything else that you just wanted to add, or that's pretty much it in a nutshell?
Yes, thanks, Carolyn. We have, like, the program is very small, but we have been receiving really positive feedback from mothers about them feeling really supported by the program, and that they hadn't found maybe other programs kind of understood their experience. It's really hard for mothers to talk with other mums or other programs about their child using violence towards them. There is a lot of shame around that. So it does seem to, really be meeting a need for mums with that, with those particular experiences and challenges. Yeah, so the feedback we've had so far is encouraging.
Were there any other surprises or differences or challenges that you hadn't quite expected when you were initially planning the program?
So I suppose one is that we were anticipating we would get a lot of referrals from the DVIR, given that they had asked for the program. But that didn't really eventuate the way we thought, and it hasn't really mattered because we are a DV service. We actually have, I suppose, like we were hearing stories ourselves, like from women experiencing violence from their children, and we were able, like if the children were the right age for the program, like able to kind of link them in with support pretty quickly. I think it just goes to show like how busy like some of these sort of peak services are, and just around their capacity to identify like on referrals for families. Yeah, so I think there's probably more about the pressure on their own programs around that, but we certainly have had plenty of interest like coming through our other programs at DVPC, and we've been able to keep the program at capacity.
Excellent. Someone's popped in the chat about the catchment area, and you've said the Gold Coast to Beenleigh is the catchment area. So for those in southeast Queensland, always good to keep in mind. I think we'll probably need to wrap up. For those that have joined today, thank you so much for your half-hour attention that you've given us. And a huge thank you to our presenters today, Olivia and Brianna. Lovely to hear from you. And we'll hopefully be keeping in touch and hearing more about how the program continues to go and evolve. Thanks very much, everyone.